What's up, family? It's your main man, Coach Crump, here with another great episode of the Boy Man King podcast. And I'm with my main man, co-host Chizzy. Say what's up to the people.
What's going on, man? It's good to be here. Good to see you. It's nice. We have a great episode ahead of us today, man. I'm kind of
Oh,
excited, man. I'm
oh
looking
man,
forward to it.
you already know what's going down. We have none other than the speaker, the motivator, the mentor, Chi-Town's finest, NLSA member,
Mm.
executive of the year. Give it up for the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Ernest James. Welcome to the platform,
Yes,
my
sir.
guy.
Welcome.
Man, I definitely appreciate that, man. It's been I've been wanting to be on here for a minute, you know what I'm saying? And I'm glad I
Okay.
finally get my chance to shine, to get my chance to be, in the presence of you guys. I've definitely been watching the podcast, and I'm definitely
Thank you.
appreciative to even been given this opportunity. So thank y'all.
Ah man,
Thank you, man.
man, the
Thank you.
honor's
Thank you
ours,
for the
man.
love.
So
For
we
sure.
get right to it, man, and it's all about us getting into our kingship. And so for me, man, I just kind of want to bring people to a little bit about our relationship in the sense of in the speaker side, entrepreneurship side, man, you made an investment to join the community. Shout out to Next Level. But man,
Hmm.
you've also kind of went from I want to speak into realizing that, man, I want to be tapped into the community. I want to be tapped in to be a better man. Tell me about what that journey has been like for you as you try to navigate this space of trying to be a better entrepreneur, realizing in order to be a better entrepreneur, I got to be a better man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you allow me a couple minutes, I want to go back to where it started, right? It's
I'm
about
glad you said
three,
that.
yeah. It's about 3 years ago, right? When I didn't even know who ET was, right?
Mm.
I didn't know
Mm.
who Jeremy was, didn't know none of Next Level, didn't even know you guys existed. So about 3 years ago, I found myself going through a divorce,
Oh,
and
Okay.
man.
also going through the pandemic, being a assistant executive pastor at that time, our church
Okay.
shutting down during the pandemic. Just a whole lot of stuff happening in this same time period, and I
Wow.
felt myself dealing with the divorce, dealing with depression. Just finding myself in a place where I'm like, dang man, I know I'm not feeling myself. And so I said, you know what? Let me start investing in some motivation. Let me start going to some places where I could be motivated. So I went to
Oh.
YouTube, right?
Hmm.
Mm.
And I looked up a certain individual who I had knew about, over just seeing videos over time. And I looked him up and I watched the video that he was on. He was being interviewed. I'm like, all right, that was cool. So I said, well, and this gentleman was African American. So I said,
Mm.
well, let me see who else is on this panel, that's been interviewed. So I'm swiping through all these interviews. Out of all the interviews that was on there, it was only one other African American person, and that was Eric
Mm.
Thomas. I didn't know
Okay.
who Eric Thomas was, never heard of him. Clicked that video, and that sent me down a whole different path.
Come
You
on,
know
whole
what I'm
different
saying?
path. Come on, whole different path.
So
He has a
man,
way of doing that.
and
Facts.
let me tell you, and this is how I know that God is good and God orchestrates our path even when we don't know it, right?
Mm.
So I click on that video. I watched a video of Eric being interviewed. And
Yeah.
so I said, all right, I like how this dude talking. Let me go to his page. And I started going to his page and look at other interviews that he did. And I got exposed to David Shands, right? Because
Mm.
David, we used to roll with him and he was doing a video with David. So I started watching David stuff. On David stuff, he had a gentleman come in to talk about speaking named Jeremy Anderson. So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, who is this dude? So I'm watching that video. And at that time, I was thinking about investing in an entrepreneur, not into a speaker's uh, platform, because I wanted to be a speaker. So I was thinking about investing in a different space because I didn't know who Jeremy was. And so I'm watching that and get to the end, go through the whole thing. So at the end, Dave was like, "Hey, Jeremy, so I know you got this program. You're gonna offer my listeners a discount." So Jeremy like, "Yeah, go ahead. I'll get you a discount." I go look up the discount. It's $1,400, right? And I'm like, man, okay. I look at my bank account, $1,500. I'm like,
Okay.
I'm getting this today. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
And
I got a
went
choice to
from
make.
that. Yeah, man. But it was just enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just enough for me
Mm.
to get it. And I clicked it
Justin.
that day. Fast forward, I went to my first conference last year. I was
Mm.
actually got baptized at the conference.
Come on.
Fast
Mhm.
forward this year, now I'm the secretary of the Chicago chapter. It all just a part of God's
Amazing.
plan. So again, now
Wow.
I'm here. Now I'm here. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I'm just like I'm grateful
Wow.
for the whole journey and even being connected with you
Mm.
guys. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? So I
That's
man.
dope.
appreciate it.
That's dope. That's inspiring to hear, man. So, Ernest, I want to take us a little bit on a journey. So, here on Boy Man King, we like to paint a picture for our viewers and our audience that speaks to how we transition from boy to a man to a king. You sound like you're entering into your kingship in this phase of your life, but we're going to go
Yes, sir.
back a little bit, talk a
Mhm.
little bit about you growing up in Chicago. What was life like in Chicago as a shorty, doing your thing with mom and dad in the household? Because you speak eloquently about where you are today, but I know there were some things that came up that
Mhm.
came to you where you are and the man you are today. So we're gonna have a slight little dive into what life was like for you in Chicago, school life, home life, community life. We hear all the stories about Chirac, so I kind of want you to paint a picture for our viewers and for our listeners on what life was like, at during those times growing up as a kid, man. So just tell us a little bit about historically, where you come from and what your life was like during that time.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, unlike a lot of people, I was actually raised in a two-parent household
Sure.
with my mom and dad my entire life until my mom passed away a couple years ago. And so, growing up in our earlier years, right, I would say we lived a middle to high middle class lifestyle, right? My dad worked for the phone company at that time. My mom
Hmm.
was a stay at home mom, but they put in that work. And so we had the house, we had the dog, we had the picket fence. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? We had the campers. We would take vacations in the summertime. We had all that,
Mm.
And so my dad got transferred to another state, and we was in that state for like 2 years before we came back. When we came back to Chicago, for whatever, I was young at that time, so I don't know the details of it,
Right.
but they wouldn't transfer my dad back, so they wouldn't give him his job back. So we went from having our own house and all of that stuff to losing everything. And it just want my
Mm.
mom and dad. I got 8 siblings, so it's 9 of us. So I got my mom and dad and 9 kids. We all
All
moved
from
into
mom and dad, all same mother, same
same
Come
family,
father.
on.
same
That's
mother, same
okay.
family,
That's what's up.
right?
Come on, Brady
So
Bunch.
you
The
got
James
12
family.
people.
James gang. What they
Hey,
call
for
y'all? The
real,
James gang?
So
James
I
gang.
tell you, we did. That was our name. But I tell you what, my grandmother on my mother's side was the baby of 12 siblings. And then she
Okay.
had 10. My mother was one of the 10. Then my mother had 9. You know what I'm
My
saying? So
goodness.
the
Big family.
community
I know
thing,
what that's like.
that's why I'm
So
so big on community, because it's just like, that's where I'm from. You
I
know
know what
yeah.
what
that's
I'm
like.
saying?
So you was in the first, the middle, or the end? Where were you in this
I was
train?
in the middle. I was in
I
the
Okay.
was in the
middle.
middle.
I was
So
Okay.
you
the
so
fourth child.
is it true that you got neglected and beat up all at the same time as a child from your
Yes,
siblings?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I was the fourth child, but the first son, right?
Okay.
Oh
The
man,
fourth
them
Okay.
child, but the
girls,
first
them
son.
older
So
girls gave it to you, bro. I already know.
it was, I really didn't have a lot of problem with my older siblings. It was the ones that came after me, right?
Oh, they
The
got
ones that came after
they
me.
bust your
And so
head wide
yeah,
open. Dang.
oh man, they would gang up on me. All of them would just jump on me, man. So yeah, that was a whole nother thing. But yeah, so my parents end up losing everything, right? And so
Mm.
you got this husband and wife and their 9 kids. We end up moving into one bedroom in my grandmother's house. My grandmother
How
had
old were
a
you? How
small.
old were you at that time? Do you remember?
Oh, it was like second grade.
Okay.
It was around second grade, so I was really young. But
Okay.
all of us was born at that time. My baby brother was the arm baby at that
Okay.
time, and so
Okay.
we were there and really trying to, my parents trying to find their footing and get back on their feet, and that took a little while,
Hmm.
and so between we kind of bounced around a little bit between my grandmother's house. We was there for a while. Then we moved into the church and we stayed at the church for a while. Then we moved into, another one of our friends' home, our parents' friends. So I'm just kind of bouncing around because it was 12 of us. You know what I mean? So it's it's hard to house a family
For
of 12.
sure.
And that also goes back, and I'd like to mention that because I would say my dad had a choice. You know what
Mm.
I'm saying? He had a choice. He could have been like, "I'm out." You know what I'm
Mm.
Yeah.
saying? And leave my mom with the kids or whatever, but he didn't. You know what I'm saying? He stayed and stuck with it,
Ain't go up a
even though
choice,
we
huh?
went through all of that. You know what I'm saying? And so eventually we end up, my grandmother on my mom's side, end up buying this plot of land. And on this plot of land, they had this old, should have been torn down house, right? I always
Mm,
say if you're
mm.
looking for a haunted house, if they was scouting for a haunted house for a movie, they would have chose this house.
Wow.
That's how it looked.
Hey.
But she bought this land, and my dad was like, "All right, we'll move there." So he moved in first, and he was
Okay.
there for a couple months, just fixing up the house to where it was livable. And so when we came, the house had three rooms that we could actually operate in. It was a bathroom, it was a kitchen, and it was one bedroom. So my mom and dad slept in the one bedroom. All the rest of us slept in the kitchen on the floor, and then we had the
Hmm.
bathroom. And we moved in the wintertime in Chicago winter, so it's cold. You know what I'm saying? And where the house was at, it was surrounded by forest preserve. So I'm talking about snakes, rabbits,
Heat, no
those
heat.
deers. Uh, we heated with the stove in the kitchen. You
Gee,
know what I'm saying? When
okay.
we first moved in. And so that was the beginning. So over time, my dad steadily worked on his house and just went room by room until he was able to fix the whole house up, where then we had access to the whole house. And then we, had better living conditions. But that was kind of where I came from,
Yeah.
not necessarily in the hood. We was in the south suburbs and away from the hood, but definitely still saw some of the effects of the hood, in our lifestyle and growing up. But one of the things that reflect on what I do now was the fact that I recognized early of the opportunity that I had by having my dad in the house,
Yeah.
Mm.
because I have
Yeah.
friends and family whose dad wasn't in the house, right? And so this one incident really shaped me too, where my dad was a mechanic, right? So when he couldn't find a job, he just went back to his garage and just worked on people's cars.
Right.
So a lot of times his clothes was oily. That's just how he dressed. It was like he didn't care. Like I work. You know what I'm saying? So my friends growing up, they would see that. And so you know how it is, you hanging out on the block, you cracking jokes on each other. And one of my friends and my brother was kind of cracking jokes on each other. And so my friend, he went like is on this long tangent talking about my dad, right? Cracking jokes on my dad, just going on and on. Everybody laughing, cracking up. My brother not saying nothing. And so when he gets to the end of it, my brother said, "You know what? It's funny that you can tell me everything about my dad, but I can't tell you anything about yours."
Mm.
My
And in
goodness.
that moment, as kids, we like, "Oh yeah, that was
Yeah.
funny," but that
Yeah.
stuck with me. To even now as an adult, it's like, man, how many kids actually are living that story that they don't
Mm.
have their fathers, right? And then even us who sometimes take for granted that our fathers are there and active, that even just seeing our fathers, how much of
Come
a
on.
difference that make in the lives of our friends and our family. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And even as an adult now, we're able to have those conversations with some of our friends. And I'm like, yeah, I remember your dad did this. I remember your dad did that. So even though at some point my dad wasn't even like directly, attached to them, but just watching them, just because he was there in my life, he was able to make a difference in their life.
Yeah.
So
And
fast
earn it.
forward, man, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can talk forever.
Nah, man, we love it. We love it. Me and Chisholm can relate on the father being active in
Facts.
your life and how he's a staple in the community, how he not only impacts you forever and ever, but also had the impact of others, just by being around you and being in the neighborhood, especially in that time of life where the neighborhood was something that was a real thing in the 80s and the
Yeah,
90s. But let's talk about mentorship. Let's talk about like the fact that we all had great fathers in our lives, right? And Ernest, you can agree to disagree, or you can confirm this. You still needed something else. It's like I had a great father. Chizzy had a great father. But as a man, and as I try to walk into kingship, just having a great father, even though that's very important and it's foundational, it actually wasn't enough to get me into the optimum version of myself. Like I needed mentorship. Like I needed it. I needed some, particular expertise in certain arenas to help me navigate certain roles that I didn't have a lot of reps in, or my father didn't get a chance to talk to me about, or that wasn't his thing, but I'm living it in real time and need help.
Yeah.
Talk about the importance of mentorship and how that affects people's development in their adult life as they try to become the better version of themselves.
man, it's so important because again, like you said, even I would even say my father. My father can give me what he didn't have. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? He can only give me the person that he was, and that's good, good and bad in some cases, right? So not only does he able to give me the best part of him, but then he also has to give me the bad part of him too, because he's a whole person. And so, like even in the earlier days, my dad used to drink a lot, and so he had
Hmm.
problems with drinking. So on for me, and I'll just say, you heard this story before. I had two people come from the same household. My brother's 1 year and 11 days younger than me, but we're like exact opposites as far as personality and lifestyle and everything. Like we're like total opposites. So with me growing up watching my dad, struggle with drinking and for a while, I'm like, I'm good on that. I don't need none of that. My brother, on the other hand, was like, give me all of that. You know what I'm saying? So he started drinking, he started getting into all kind of stuff early. But
Mm,
it wasn't because he didn't have that example. But then when you start thinking about those who didn't have the example, again, he can only give me what he had. So there was parts
Right.
of who I wanted to be that I
yeah.
couldn't get from him. So when it came to entrepreneurship, I had to look out, where can I find that at? Because that
Mm,
wasn't who he was. When it
Yeah.
came to ministry, as far as growing up in the church, my dad was around the church, but he never was active in, well, he was active as part of, like, he took part in things, but he was never active like a member. That was my mom's side. He was like, hey, I just roll with you when I feel like it. If I don't feel like it, I stay at home and watch the game. That was who he was.
yeah.
So in ministry, again, I had to look for those pastors, those preachers, those ones who were going to give me mentorship in those spaces. And then I had a conversation with a gentleman this morning, and we were talking about fatherhood, and we were talking about raising our daughters. I'm a girl dad. My daughter's 21. Have a beautiful daughter. Started
Hmm.
a podcast called Girl Dad Discussions, where I talk to
Okay.
other girl dads. And so we was having this conversation this morning,
Shout out
and
to you and
we
girl
talking
dad.
about,
We ain't gonna blow by that. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I know you getting it out, brother. But you know what I mean. Shout out to your daughter, man.
yeah.
And you only have one daughter.
I have one biological child, which is my daughter, and I have
Yeah.
four stepsons
All right.
from my
Awesome.
previous marriage.
Awesome.
And so actually that goes into what I was saying, because the gentleman I was talking to, we was talking about fatherhood and showing
Hmm.
up as a father, and I was telling him that you can only be what you see. So if
Yeah.
you never had the experience of what it was to have a father in the home, how do you know what it is to show up as a father? And
Mm,
so in my friend's life, his father died when he was young. So he grew
Hmm.
up without a father figure. But his thing was, he always said, well, I'm going to be active in the lives of my sons. I'm never going to, let them be raised without a father. But then when he had kids, he wasn't active in their lives. When
Right.
he had sons, he wasn't active in their lives. And I said, well, because yes, you can say that you want something, but if you don't have an idea of what that is, then how do you know how to do it? You're going to
And you
fall
may
back
not even be
into
equipped.
autopilot. Yeah,
Yeah.
you gonna fall into autopilot because
Yeah.
you don't know what a father is, and your experience, a father never showed up. So what's you gonna do? You're gonna not show up. The only way you're gonna change that is when you actively start looking. I want to be a better father. Let me go to where better fathers are. I want to be a
mm,
better man. Let me go where better men are. You know what I'm saying? And we as men definitely have to be able to be confident within ourselves, yet vulnerable enough to say,
Hmm.
I don't have it all. Let me go
Hmm.
look for who has
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
And again, that's why coming into this whole thing, coming to us with next level and the men that's a part of it and everything, it's just like, yeah, that's where I want to be, because we have that mentorship in every space. We have those examples where we
For
can come
sure.
together as men and just be like, look, let's have a conversation. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
The village
I'm
is super
struggling. You know what
important.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, the village. What you're describing is it's a term. It takes a village to raise a child, and I think we say that just because that's a general way to say, hey, if you want a child to be successful or a person to be successful, it requires the efforts of a bunch of people. But it is more true than anything now, because even as you transition from your boy to your man, the village still maintains. It may look different, but it
Mm,
still requires the efforts of other people to get you into a place for the places that you want to go. Because to your
yeah.
point, sometimes the people that love us and care for us the most may not necessarily be equipped to give us what we need to take us to the next level. And that's okay. But as a man and as a responsible man, you have a responsibility to yourself. And of course, once you have kids, you have a responsibility to your children to ensure that you create a brotherhood for yourself so that you can now go from from being, from needing a resource to demonstrating resources for your children. So the village maintains and it grows,
Yeah.
and that's part of why the Next Level family is amazing. That's part of why we created this platform, because brotherhood is probably more vital now as you get older, as you transition to different phases of manhood, than it probably ever was when you were younger, with so many other
Oh, yeah.
things going on, in our lives. I heard you talk about, post divorce life, and what it was like to even parent post divorce. I have an understanding that I too come from a divorced environment, and I know the challenges that come with co-parenting. I also know the work that I had to do to ensure that no matter what, I'm still a resource to my children. I still recognize that the pain that I experience in that relationship is not a reflection of who I am and who I want to be and the example that I'm trying to have for my children. And that's a consistent, everyday reshaping of a mindset, but that only helps with a village. When you get
Yeah.
around brothers like yourself can say, hey, this is what worked for me, or this is how I help myself in that space. And we don't do that enough. So I applaud you for being honest about that. Um, so at this particular point, so it sounds like that's what inspired you to be a mentor yourself,
Yeah.
because you spoke openly about, you recognize that your dad may not necessarily have the skills, and so you created a village that allowed you to get what you needed, and now you seem like you have a responsibility to the males and the females who don't have fathers, who don't have that representation. It sounds like you have now taken up that mantle and says it's now my responsibility to give somebody some of the skills that I received from maybe sometimes from a complete stranger, and that's
Yeah.
amazing. Talk a little bit about how did you arrive at that particular space, from what where you was in middle school to high school. Was there anything pivotal that you said, all right, this is what I want to do. This is the man I want to be. This is the legacy I want to have and want to send on for my kids. Talk a little bit about that for us.
Well, I'll tell you. So going back to the beginning where I started the story at is like 3 years ago, going through that divorce, right?
Hmm.
So going through that divorce, one of the things that I recognized in reflecting on myself and past relationships was, and this actually was the beginning of how I even got into speaking, podcasting, and all of that, was
Hmm.
because I came to a realization that every woman I've ever dated throughout my life was a fatherless daughter. And
Hmm.
so I was like, man, so when I realized that, I said, well, they're attracted to me or I'm attracted to them. But for whatever reason, we keep connecting. So what can I do to help this demographic?
I
So I
know
went,
this life. Trust
yeah,
me.
yeah. So I went to Instagram and I formed a page on Instagram called Friend to Fatherless Daughters. And I went on there and I just was, expressing my concern and things that I thought would help fatherless daughters from a perspective of being a girl dad, one, dating
Hmm.
fatherless daughters, two, but also from watching my dad raise five sisters. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? So just going on there and giving my viewpoint, and people start calling me, asking me to come and be a guest on their podcast to talk about it. So I just started talking about it. And then I wrote an ebook called The Four Core, which is the four core values that every daughter should get from her father. Right.
Hmm.
And so those values are guidance, love and affection, affirmation, and protection.
Hmm.
And I got that again from my own experience as being a girl dad. What were the values I wanted my daughter to have? Then what was the main values that my sisters was getting from my dad? And then with the women that I had dated, being fatherless daughters, what were the things that I could recognize now that they were missing?
Yeah.
And so putting all that together, that's what pushed me even into this whole speaking thing. Now, I
I
was
love it.
speaking in the church as a minister and things of that nature, but outside of that realm, that was the main thing that pushed me forward, even into the spotlight, because I wasn't doing none of this. And then
Yeah.
once that light got shined on me, and then I started getting those phone calls, it's like, all right, I got to address this. And that kind of started. That's what things started, putting me more so in the spotlight. And so I remember having a conversation with one of those, because I ended up doing like five different podcasts. And one
Hmm.
of the gentlemen that was the host of the podcast, I had a chance to meet him in person. And in the midst of our conversation, he was like, I think you should have your own podcast. So I said,
Yeah.
okay, and so 170 some episodes later. You
Yes,
know what
sir.
I'm saying?
Yes,
Here
sir.
I am. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah,
the Girl
man.
Dad podcast was my second podcast, and that was like, I think we like 52 episodes into that podcast. So, but that was the catalyst. Just what really kind of pushed me once realized that thing with the girl dads and that connection. I mean, with the fatherless daughters and that connection I had with them, even going back again, recognizing how fortunate I was to have my dad in my life, how
Yeah.
fortunate my sisters were to have my dad in our lives. And that just kind of was the catalyst that kind of pushed me in the spotlight more so now.
Yeah, Ernest, man, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege, man, just to chop it
For
up with
sure.
you. Man, you got a lot to offer. And with that being
Yeah.
said, man, let the people know all the different platforms and resources. And they can get more game about you and what you got going on and how they can tap in with you.
All right. First of all, let me say thank you guys for having me on. I already was a fan of the podcast,
Hey,
so I'm
Thank
glad
appreciate
to
you.
it,
have
man.
my chance to to be on here. But you can find me at on YouTube. If you go to my YouTube channel, it's called the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, and there you will find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. I got a podcast that I started with my brother called the Earn the Earth podcast. That's
Come on.
there. Then I have
Okay.
I helped my sister get her develop her podcast. She's been doing a Bible study podcast for over 3 years now, so that's there. So that's one space you can find me. As far as the ebooks, we talked about the ebook, the four core, which is the four core values that every daughter should receive from her father. I also have an ebook called From Males to Men, which is a ebook for young men transitioning into manhood. And right now, I'm giving away. I have an ebook called uh, Forgiving Me: The Four Steps to Self Forgiveness. So you
Mm.
can find that. I'm giving that one away absolutely free. But
Come on.
those are at ebooks by ejames.com. Again, that's ebooks by ejames.com. I made that simple so everybody can remember it. Yeah, but you can find me there. And then my personal website is dealhealfulfill.com, because my mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. And that is my mission. So you can
Love it.
find me there. So
Listen,
Love it. Love
Chizzy,
it.
I was gonna make you follow up, but I might have to have him shut it down. I might have to have him shut it down after that one, my boy. But Chizzy,
Hey, I just want to
can,
thank you, though.
yeah,
I want to thank you personally, man. I want to thank you. I'm too a girl dad. My daughter's 17. She's in her last year of high school, so I know what that's like. I know what
yeah.
it's like to parent from the lens of a divorced parent. I know what that's like. So I'll be very, very eager and interested to read your ebook about those four core values, because I think it's instrumental. The first person, sorry, the first male a woman learns to love is her dad, and that makes and breaks what the trajectory could be for the life. So I really, that resonates with me a lot. So I want to thank you for that, because that inspires me to focus a lot more of my intentionality with my daughter.
Mhm.
So I want to thank you openly for that on the behalf of the Boy Man King podcast, man. That's a blessing. That's a blessing for me, man.
yeah, man. Look, hey, follow us on Boy Man King Podcast. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and Boy Man King Talk. Please like and subscribe and share this message and this episode. Man, Ernest is powerful, and you know where to follow him as well.
Powerful.
Man, thank you to our team. Shout out to everyone. And as we say on the Boy Man King Pod, the
Yes,
journey
sir.
continues.
The journey
Y'all be blessed.
continues.
We catch you on the
Be
next one. We
blessed.
out. Peace.
Peace.